got some footage we want you to hear. We're going to set that up on audio so you can hear it. We're working toward doing that. We'll export that to you guys, okay? So you have that. There's another call-in that happened from a citizen regarding gunfire that we're going to work on also. I'm going to read you the transcript of that, but we're going to try to disguise a voice on there so we can just do that and let you have that too regarding some of the threats to the helicopters in the airspace. So that's all forthcoming next couple of days.
So those won't come out today?
Well, we're working on it, and they will come out. I just don't quite have it yet.
Okay, this is press conference about this part. You want me to on this and like you discussed?
We'll fix it. How's that? My clock's off too, I can tell you that.
Mine too.
I keep thinking it's like 5. Are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Like 10 seconds on my time. Yeah.
Whatever you are. Hey, listen, when this story first broke yesterday, I was a little bit confused. One of the things that occurred to me as part of the Unified Command was that we never had any discussions among ourselves about TFRs, temporary flight restrictions. So when I read the report that talked about the fact that it was used basically to ensure that the media didn't have access to the airspace, that was certainly something new to me. I'll tell you this, we had, as you guys remember, most of the problems began on the night of the 10th. I'm going to get this to you in the next few days, but I want to read this to you. This is a transcript. This is a caller into St. Louis County Communications. I'm just laying low, but they started shooting at the helicopter. Dispatch. They're shooting at the helicopter? Yeah. Yeah, I seen them aiming up. They had a pistol, black, looked like kinda. I couldn't tell what kind of gun, but I'm just looking out my window and watching the news. But they were aiming right up there at the helicopter. I ain't trying to laugh, but I'd hate to have a helicopter crash. Dispatch. No, I understand. To give you a little bit more of this, you guys have to listen close. I'm going to get this to you. This is going to be some audio on the 19th of August between the St. Louis County Police helicopter and the Bureau of Communications.
And that was the 10th we just heard.
That was the 10th.
Airport, we did have a laser strike on the aircraft. It was on the 270 West Florissant area. We're able to get an exact location, and it's not no longer going on. That's clear. What altitude were you at? We're right about 2,200 feet. That's clear in time frame? Yeah, about 10 minutes ago. Your command post, to communications. Communications is clear. Clear. And again, that was 10 minutes ago. They're 2,200 feet in the area of West Florissant and 270 on a laser strike. Communications is clear. 904. And airport, can you make sure the other aircraft that's above us is aware of that? 7199 and right back here. Command post is clear direct and all that. Thank you. And notification is being made. Sorry about that. Airport expert, thank you.
I'm sorry Captain Frizz isn't here today, but Captain Frizz is a 25-year veteran pilot, so he's familiar with flying aircraft. Captain Frizz gets a call on the 11th at 4 o'clock in the morning on the command post line from the FAA. Now the interesting thing about that is the command post line is not a published number. You would have to be able to call communications to get that phone number for somebody to call you. So the FAA called communications, then they called the command post, then they got Captain Frizz at 4 o'clock in the morning. And they asked him, they recommended to him that they do a TFR, temporary flight restriction, on from the Lambert Tower due to concern regarding the amount of air traffic in the Ferguson area. They talked between FAA and the command post, and Lambert Tower expressed that with the shots being fired at the helicopter, at the aircraft, and the amount of air traffic in the arena, that TFR is to take place. Intelligence throughout this had been gathered from credible sources that certain groups were targeting the helicopters and would use rifles in an attempt to take them out. One afternoon, we got information at the Unified Command that there was a strategy to laser the helicopters. And when you laser the helicopter, those bright lights hit. It's almost like looking at welding or looking into the sun. It disorients the pilots, and they have a difficult time being able to maneuver out of that until they take necessary precautions. So we had intelligence that came in regarding laser and rifles aimed at the aircraft. If any of you guys were in the corridor, and I'm sure that you were during this, there were a lot of shots being fired in the corridor. Some of those were fired at the ground. Some of those sounded like they went into the air. Some of those were aimed fire. So the issue with the FAA was that they were concerned about the volume of air traffic, what they were controlling from the Lambert Tower and from the Kansas City main hub on the other side of the state that monitors this. Captain Frizz made sure police flight crews were aware of the intelligence gathered in reference to the subjects targeting helicopters, and they made a decision to start a TFR from 3:30 in the evening until 6 a.m. the next day. And that was to carry on for the next few days until it was lifted on the 22nd. There were certain times during this period that somebody else could fly at a certain altitude, for example 3,000 feet above the police helicopters that flew between 1,000 and 1,200 feet. So there is footage of some media in here that took those shots during the daylight hours. So it wasn't prohibited altogether. You could fly around the TFR, you could fly above the TFR if you were through it, if you got permission through the tower to do that. Certainly our helicopter pilots took measures to increase their safety by gaining some altitude during this, but at no time, and I just got off the phone with Captain Frizz, I've been on the phone with him several times today, did we request that only media be kept out of the airspace. And again, I would like to reiterate that the FAA contacted us regarding the amount of air traffic that was in that location regarding this TFR. TFRs aren't all that unusual. Everybody in this room understands. We have TFRs in place oftentimes for Cardinal baseball games, for football games, for different arenas such as that. TFRs happen from time to time, pretty rarely, but they do happen on tactical events for different kind of reasons. The police helicopter did, however, remain in the area through the TFR because our police department, as you might imagine, has a responsibility to ensure the safety of those people on the ground that are peacefully assembling, peacefully protesting, along certainly with the citizens and the businesses in the neighborhood and our police officers on the ground. The police helicopter routinely checked on calls for service. It was more efficient than sending ground crews, certainly at different times in the evening. And we were able to use the police helicopter to check out certain prank calls. We would get calls from time to time that, for example, there was a house fire or an apartment fire in Canfield. We sent the helicopter down there to make sure that that was or was not happening. In that case, it wasn't. We had the police helicopter down there one evening because we had several trash cans on fire. Well, do we roll the fire department in there to put trash cans out? Is it something that's going to be contained? Is it a fire that's going to extend? The helicopter is able to monitor those things, say, no, it's a trash fire, it's contained at the moment, let's just leave it alone. One example of this, I'm sorry, I already talked about that. Again, it is critical that we're able to use this air asset to ensure the safety of those on the ground. You know, we were fortunate, I'll talk about it again, in August not to have any loss of life. We certainly want to move forward with the same amount of luck, of outcome, to where we don't have anything like that happen to us. So again, I'd like to reiterate, I'd like to underscore the fact that the FAA started this conversation with the police department because of the number of shots that were fired. This was reported. We have air crews that talk about seeing muzzle flashes from the ground. They don't know where they are necessarily. Obviously the helicopters weren't hit. They do have to hover at times very low and use the night sun to take a look at certain things. With the intelligence gathered on the lasering on the helicopters, trust me, it's not an easy job for these pilots to be out there doing what they're doing. They have no reason to necessarily preclude anybody from their airspace other than safety. And I'm sure that was paramount in their decision-making regarding this in concert with the FAA. I would ask you that some of the questions that you need answered are going to have to be referred to the FAA. We've been on the phone with the FAA today, not only here in St. Louis, but in Washington, talking to them about this story, what has been attributed to the police department. They were restricted this just for the purpose of restricting the media from that airspace. Again, I can tell you that when this story first broke, I'm looking at this thinking, well, this is the first I've heard of this. I can tell you myself, Chief Dodson, Captain Johnson, everybody else who was in the arena during this, we didn't have these type of discussions in the Unified Command. We were busy dealing with other issues, and this never came up regarding us. I certainly trust the judgment of the FAA. I certainly trust the judgment of Captain Frizz. I certainly trust the judgment of these pilots who are making those calls in the air at that time. So we're going to get this transcript to you when I can shield it a little bit more regarding the caller. We'll send that out so you can hear that better. We're also digging through this to find more instances of radio traffic that goes through. We're completing a police report that spans from the 10th day of August to basically the present, and it's taken a while to encapsulate that as a continuing event.
How do you explain?
Go ahead, I got it first.
Just the bottom line is, one, the FAA called you first, and second, this was all about safety.
Yes, it's always all about safety. I mean, that's just the bottom line on this. We don't have the ability to preclude people out of there for any other reason other than that. And had we just wanted to move the media away from this arena, we would have started that on the ground, and that's not what happened. But we're flying different levels. As you guys know, that's Class B airspace anyway right there because of the approach and the departure out of Lambert Field. So the closer we get to the airport, the tougher it's going to be to fly in and out of there anyway. And the tower is concerned with bringing commercial traffic in or out over the top of us at a certain altitude as we fly layers below that.
So
how do you explain some of those recordings that did seem to indicate otherwise?
I think they're taken out of context, and I think probably they're informal conversations that happen between somebody there and somebody saying, well, I guess it's just the media. I can't explain that, to be honest with you, because I wasn't there with it. Captain Frizz wasn't a party to that. He wasn't there when those conversations happened either, and I would direct you to the FAA regarding that, because certainly we don't have those kind of conversations regarding this. We don't have that ability to.
Would you explain why this flight was safe during that time then, for commercial flights to fly and for your helicopter to fly, but why it was not safe for a news helicopter?
It probably was never safe for our helicopter to fly 100%, but because of the altitude of the commercial airlines, it was probably a different deal than based on the altitude they can gather.
And then why would it be safe for your helicopter?
It wasn't safe for our helicopter. Nor was it safe for the officers on the ground, nor was it safe for the people who lived in the area with that kind of gunfire and other things such as that. But the helicopter, the police helicopter, has a responsibility to back up the officers on the ground. So they're going to take that risk as part of their job.
So just to be clear, there have been 2 documented incidences that you just described on the 10th and the 19th involving direct threats, but you're reviewing your records with the understanding that there were additional incidents?
Yes, and additional intelligence that was gathered regarding threats that came in, probably a few days after the 11th, as this continued to spin on regarding the lasers and the rifles and different things such as that. So I mean, suffice it to say that the lower you get, the easier you are to be a target and the easier you are to be negatively impacted by gunfire.
Were there any other air assets deployed that maybe haven't been talked about, like surveillance drones? You just didn't want to
There were no drones in the corridor. We didn't do that.
Well, I
You
mean,
don't have the ability.
were there any other federal agencies, that you know?
There were other air assets in the area, and I'm not going to comment on any further.
There were other air assets in here?
Yes.
Could that be an issue? We didn't want a bunch of news helicopters flying into some other air assets?
Again, that could have been, but I'll be honest with you, this was not a conversation that the Unified Command had with any other federal agency either regarding this issue with the media. Could it be a concern? Certainly, but I think that was driven by the FAA.
Did any news stations seek out further explanation or reach out to you with concerns or objections to this?
They did. I think that was on the 12th. I wouldn't really say there were objections. It was an explanation given out by the public information staff on the county police department as in, hey, listen, we're getting these threats. We've had some calls. We're a little worried about the airspace. And really, we didn't hear much after that. Now, we would talk to FAA every day. So the 11th, the 12th, 13th, 14th, etc., until it was lifted on the 22nd. Now, I don't really know why it was lifted on the 22nd. I don't know if that was induced by the police department, the FAA, or who did it. It would have been one of us, or perhaps just one of the pilots finally said, hey, listen, this isn't a problem anymore. We can fly this without, we can let everybody back in the airspace without worrying, because the tension had ratcheted down at that point.
Chief, the original altitude was 5,000 feet, if I recall correctly, and then it was dropped to 3,000 or 3,500. Any explanation for that, or is that more for the
First
FAA?
part of your question?
I believe the original altitude was 5,000 in kind of that cone shape that this essentially made, and then it was dropped to around 3,000 or 3,500. Was that at the request of police? Was that having to do with the FAA's?
I would, my best guess, and it is a guess, is that's probably the FAA doing that regarding what their rules are on that altitude coming in and out of there, because again, they're trying to rein in pretty busy Class B airspace at that point with the TFR in place. So I've been around it. I'm not a pilot, but I've been around it enough to understand that typically those altitude restrictions come out of the FAA, not the police department.
So to be clear, if the Unified Command wasn't necessarily the one making the FAA, or communicating with the FAA, who would have had the sort of ears for the county department? Who was talking with the FAA?
So that would have been Captain Ferguson, okay? And Captain Ferguson has been on the department about 29 years. He's been a pilot. He remains as a pilot on the police department, although he didn't fly the same tempo that he used to. So Captain Frizz was well suited to take that first phone call by the FAA, but that was by happen chance also. He just happened to be the duty officer that morning when he rolled in at 4 a.m. and caught that phone call. And then when Frizz transitioned to nights, then somebody else had that conversation with the FAA. But please keep in mind, Captain Johnson, Sam Dodson, John Milner, we can't make every possible decision. That's why we have a chain of command, and that's why we have colonels, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, etc.
Have you heard the audio on this? I mean, have you yourself heard the audio that the AP has?
No, I haven't heard the audio. I read a transcript of the audio, but I haven't heard the audio.
Do you know who it is that's speaking?
No, I don't.
The two things. So I want to get, FAA did this because of number of aircraft and the bullets flying, correct? Safety, not just number of aircraft, but also the bullets. And second of all, you made a decision on when the decision comes down from the grand jury, what will happen to the airspace then over different parts of the community if there are problems, or is that wait and see? Or
so on August 11th, Lambert Tower reached out to the command post due to the concern regarding the amount of air traffic in the Ferguson area. So I think their first responsibility they looked at was how are we going to manage this air traffic in Class B airspace? I'm assuming that, but that would be something that you would expect them to be doing regarding that. I cannot explain every detail about what they talked about, lasering or gunshots or anything other than that. We do know we have that call on the 10th. We have the call we documented on the 19th regarding lasers. We're trying to fill in the gaps in between and try to figure out where that is. But as you might imagine, there are thousands of hours of communications tapes we're trying to go through regarding this, plus interviews with our pilots who remain flying every day at their jobs.
So they're concerned for the amount of police helicopters or other helicopters that were in that area?
Air traffic is the way that it was explained to me.
when the jury comes down, the grand jury, is there a decision, or you can wait and see, or how's it going to
Well, you know, it depends. I mean, the unique thing about Ferguson in August was everything was contained to one corridor. I mean, it really was. And then we saw a few weekends ago that it went to Shaw, and it went to Grove and Ferguson and Clayton, different places like that. I'm not sure in the future what November is going to look like. Again, number one, we want it as peaceable as possible. I'm optimistic that's going to happen, but it may be in more than one area. It's going to be very difficult for us to put TFRs around, even if we wanted to. We don't have carte blanche when it comes to that. So I really don't see the same effect. Anytime, the closer you get to Lambert, though, the closer you are going to have a problem regarding flying over that airspace, because it is tightly controlled.
How concerned are you about what's going to happen when the grand jury's verdict comes out, and how prepared would you say that the department?
I would say we're very prepared. I've worked with the St. Louis County Police Department, I've worked with the Metropolitan Police Department, we've worked with the Highway Patrol, we've worked with our municipal partners to make sure as we're prepared for this as we possibly can. We've had very high-level meetings from pretty much the 1st of September until today, talking about those issues. Listen, I'm optimistic that we're going to get through this as peaceably as possible. My officers and my staff, the Highway Patrol, St. Louis City, we're doing the same training. We're emphasizing to our officers the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, our oath of office. We're emphasizing to our officers the duty that they have, the professional bearing that they have to demonstrate on this. And at the same time, we're reaching out to stakeholders in the community, our protesters, different people like that, and we're saying, hey, listen, we have to do this the right way. We can't afford to have the fabric of St. Louis torn apart with this, but we can, of course, have the opportunity to talk about things that are important to us. We have that ability to be skeptical. I would just ask people not to be cynical to the point to where it turns into something beyond a peaceable assembly.
But we are hearing people say it's confirmed.
Well, and you know what? We have, as the police chief, we have to separate rhetoric from intelligence also. How much of that is emotions? How much is driven by that? You know, it's hard to know. It really is. But, you know, we have a responsibility to protect life, to protect property, and ensure people's rights. It's a balancing act, but we're going to do the very best job we can to do that.
Are you expecting both your department and the public to get advance notice of when this happens? Is that necessary?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't drive that. You know, that's going to be the Prescott Attorney's Office on the timing of that. I don't know what the timing is of that right now. I've purposely stayed away from the grand jury proceedings. I can't tell you any more about what's going on in there than you can tell me, I suspect. I would imagine that law enforcement will have an idea of when this is going to come down. I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. As far as when the public knows, I can't say that yet. That's the discussion that we're going to have between the Prescott Attorney's Office, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, the St. Louis County Police Department, and Highway Patrol, kind of to bring all that together and try to do what the best thing would be for the safety of the community.
You're not aware that this is happening this week?
I'm not aware that it's that imminent, no. Sir?
Will you again authorize the use of tear gas? And
I wouldn't take anything off the table. If I never saw tear gas again as a police chief, it would be okay. I just don't want to see those things again. But at the same time, we made it through 11 days of criminal activity that unfortunately spiraled out of the protest, the assembly. And oftentimes when I would ask commanders, you know, why are we doing this? The answer would be, well, they've thrown Molotov cocktails at us. I asked a captain one time, I said, you tear gassed these folks. I saw that. Why didn't you go after them? Why weren't they arrested? The captain looked at me and without hesitation, he says, we had a plan in place to make those arrests, but we couldn't because they were shooting at us. We chose to use that less lethal chemical agent versus gunfire from our end. I just didn't feel like as the police chief that was worth it. I hope we don't see that again. We've not seen it since. But yet at the same time, I have a responsibility, Chief Dodson, Captain Johnson, to make sure that everybody, criminal or not, walks out of this at the other end. And I would hope that doesn't have to happen. Those are things that we'll have to balance as we move forward. I will say, suffice to say, we hope our strategies are different. You know, we hope that we can do this in as a controlled manner as possible. I'm not going to get into operations. There's things we're going to do differently. I'll leave it at that.
Chief, a question from my colleague Jack Gillum in Washington, who wrote the story we were discussing. he noted that we had asked for copies of reports, damage reports involving helicopters a week ago, but they weren't provided. So the question is, what's happening in the interim?
Yeah, we didn't damage a helicopter by gunfire as far as we know. I mean, I would have known that. That would have come out before. We don't have that.
Well, I think reports about threats more broadly, not damage per se.
Well, to be honest with you, here we are today talking about this. I feel like I'm compelled to talk about this issue today, but frankly, I would have preferred not to talk about this issue at all if I could have helped it. I don't want to empower anybody. I don't want to give anybody the idea about shooting at an aircraft. I don't want to give anybody an idea about lasering an aircraft, different things like that. Are they unknown to us? No. But again, you know, it's part of this balancing act. So I don't want to advertise these issues any more than I already have to. I understand the position we're in now, and I have to be frank and talk about these things. But at the same time, I felt like it was important to talk to everybody today a little bit about the context of what transpired between the county police department and the FAA. I'll take 2 more questions.
If there's looting this time, will the police officers stand down like happened last time, or will they employ different tactics?
Well, the stand down was for one evening, and I don't anticipate that will ever happen again. You know, we have an oath of office. We're going to do our best to protect life and property, and I think we saw that as we moved on. So, listen, different strategies were tried. I get it. I understand it. But we have had a hue and cry from the business arena, all the way from our small business owners, all the way up to our big corporations that are really worried about that. I've done everything I could and I can to ensure them that, you know, the police department's still the police department. We're going to do what we can to impact that in a positive manner. A lot of these small businesses have their entire lives wrapped up in these businesses, and we have to do what we have to do to protect those. One more question, and I'm out of here if anybody has anything. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Well, can we go back to one thing?
Yes.
And I want to kind of nibble around the edges again. On this, you said that there were other air assets in the area that you can't talk about. Can you talk about those a little bit more? Because what I'm trying to get at is, and I'm wondering, is that part of the equation where you're restrained from telling us that maybe this had something to do with it?
It didn't have anything to do with that, Kevin. It didn't at all, okay? I certainly didn't have any conversations with anybody else who may or may not have been in the air regarding this issue of the media. Yeah. That did not come up, okay? That's not part of this.
Yeah. Are these other air assets for the purpose of surveillance?
They're for the purpose of supporting the operation on the ground. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.